Chapter 71. Ronaldo's POV. I felt the weight of everything that had transpired as I stood at the Vargas Pack mansion's threshold. The storm raging inside of me stood in stark contrast to the calm night outside. The entire werewolf community, not just our pack, had been impacted by Malik Blackthorn's attack. I also couldn't get rid of the feeling that things were changing in ways I couldn't control as I dealt with the fallout. I had spent so much time fighting to keep the family together and to defend my pack. Now, however, I was beginning to see that the fight was far from over as the rogue wolves gathered in the distance. It had only just started, in fact. The mansion towered over me, its magnificence concealing the cracks that were starting to appear in my own social circle. There had been innumerable battles on the walls, but none like the one that was about to happen. I knew I couldn't handle it by myself. I needed to gather the group. Even though I had no idea what the future held, it was time to face it. There was tension in the meeting room. There was a lot of mistrust and uncertainty in the air. The pack leaders came in one by one, their faces hard with unsolved problems as their eyes scanned the room. Alpha Laura of the Blacktail Pack said, "Ronaldo," in a clipped voice. "We must talk about our next course of action. The sooner we take action, the better, because the rogues are assembling." With my mind racing, I nodded. "We must be united. We are all at risk from the rogue wolves. We must fight together if we are to defeat them." But you could feel the tension in the room. While some leaders avoided making eye contact, others exchanged powerful glances. Alpha Riggs of the Ironclaw Pack said harshly, "You're asking for too much." "We've already lost too much. My pack isn't yet prepared to accompany you." I tried to control my temper by clenching my jaw. "This is about more than one pack. We will all fall if we do not unite and fight as one." There was silence in the room. For the first time, I questioned whether I had the fortitude to keep this alliance together, as I felt the weight of their doubt bearing down on me. Our unity was eroding, and not all of them were prepared to fight for the same cause. Once more, Alpha Laura spoke in a frustrated tone. "You cannot expect us to follow without question. Ronaldo, trust must be earned. You cannot simply demand allegiance." I wanted to argue with them and tell them that I had given this pack my all, but I was unable to do so. They were correct. I hadn't gained their complete confidence. Not just yet. "I understand," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "However, rogue wolves are only the first step. The curse is the true threat. Before it's too late, we must put an end to it. We cannot afford to continue arguing with one another." There was a long pause, and I briefly feared that rage would burst out of the room. Alpha Riggs, however, narrowed his eyes and leaned forward. He said slowly, in a tone that was almost challenging, "I'll fight. However, I'm not doing it for you. For my pack, I'm doing this. You better prove you're worth following, Ronaldo, or you'll be standing alone." I nodded, acknowledging his words. I couldn't afford to lose any more allies. However, I was also aware that this went beyond simply demonstrating my value. It was about preserving the future and safeguarding the people I cared about. As the conversation went on, each pack leader raised their own issues, and I could sense my leadership eroding with every second that went by. It had always been me who brought them together and kept them together. However, I was now beginning to see that the emotional toll and the burden of their expectations were the real costs of being an alpha, not just the physical struggles. I sensed the cracks getting deeper as the meeting went on. I questioned whether I could maintain the alliance and whether I could keep the pack resilient enough to withstand the impending storm. However, I couldn't give up. Not now. I was about to speak to the group once more when the meeting room door suddenly flew open. I turned to see a dark silhouette of a person standing in the doorway. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice sharp, my hand instinctively moving toward the dagger at my side. My blood ran cold as the figure moved forward. This was someone I knew. I had witnessed their fall and demise. It was impossible. "Ronaldo," the figure said in a mocking tone and a voice that was familiar. "Did you truly believe you could get away from me? Did you truly believe you could get rid of me so quickly?" A beat skipped in my chest. I couldn't decide if I should be afraid or relieved. Someone I believed to be long dead, someone who had been buried in the past, someone who had once been close to me, was standing in front of me, still alive and breathing. "Dante?" My voice was hardly audible as I whispered. With a perverted smile on his face, Dante, the man I had once trusted with my life and believed to be dead, was now standing in front of me. With venom in his voice, he declared, "Reinaldo, I'm not dead. Not just yet. However, I will be. For you." I was so shocked by his return that the room fell silent. My pack members' faces were visible to me. Their eyes were wide with shock, and some of them were already grabbing their weapons. However, I didn't have to observe their responses. Dante was all I could think about. Rogue wolves were no longer the only issue here. It was intimate. I didn't know how to deal with the fact that the past had returned to haunt me. "What brings you here?" My voice trembled with a mixture of confusion and rage as I asked. Dante grinned more broadly. "Reinaldo, to complete what we began, you think you can keep your throne? Do you believe you can guide them? You are nothing. You're not strong, and you're going to see how much." The air was heavy with tension as the room tensed. Even though I could feel his words weighing heavily on me, I resisted letting them shatter me. I gritted my teeth and said, "You'll regret this. You're not going to prevail." Dante's icy laugh reverberated throughout the room. "Reinaldo, you no longer have authority. You weren't." And suddenly the old darkness was back. Dante wanted what? What impact did his comeback have on my rule? I had no idea how this chapter of my life would play out, and the future was unpredictable. But there was no doubt in my mind. I was going to encounter a conflict that was unlike any I had ever encountered. Would I make it through this new danger? Could I ever get control back? Or did everything I had battled for come to an end? Chapter 072. Valeria's POV. I had trouble falling asleep. It was difficult to breathe because of the tense atmosphere in the pack house, which felt like it was pressing against my chest. I had hoped that things would calm down now that the fight against the curse was over. However, I was still unable to find the tranquility I had sought. Rather, I was plagued by gloomy thoughts and doubts about everything, including myself, the pack, and Reinaldo. Even after giving this battle my all, I couldn't get rid of the uneasy feeling. The enemies we had faced were far from done with us, and the ghosts of our past weren't ready to let go. And Emiliano was the one thing I couldn't ignore. Thoughts of him persisted like a ghost, despite my best efforts to ignore them. Even though we had chosen to break our bond, it still pulled at me, making things seem more complicated than they needed to be. With a part of me still wondering what might have been with Emiliano, how could I fully commit to Reinaldo? I discovered the answer to one of my most disturbing questions in the middle of the night. I heard hushed voices coming from the war room as I was trying to get some fresh air in the pack house's hallways. When I heard the distinct sound of a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, I stopped, straining to listen, my heart pounding. "Are you certain they won't suspect anything?" A voice I didn't recognize asked in a low, urgent voice. Another voice, one I was all too familiar with, said, "Don't worry, it was too familiar. I have exercised caution. They have faith in me." As soon as I heard the words, everything seemed to stop. They have faith in me. I had to cling to the wall to prevent myself from falling because my mind was racing. Now it could not be mistaken. One of the pack's most reliable allies was that voice. It made my stomach turn to hear someone I had known for years talk like this, so casually plotting in the dark. I edged toward the door, each step a betrayal in and of itself. My worst fears were validated by the words that followed. "That's it, then. Malik's army is drawing nearer. Everything will work itself out once we hit." The voice, brimming with malevolent satisfaction, said, "Reinaldo won't know what hit him." I went cold. Talk was no longer enough. Malik Blackthorn was their collaborator. Even worse, I was unaware of how long they had been doing it. My veins went cold. The ground seemed to have been torn out from under me. The very people we had been fighting against now had a trusted ally working with them, someone I had fought with, someone who had always been there. With my mind racing and my heart racing, I staggered backward. Betrayal. I kept hearing the word. It was crushingly heavy. How could this have occurred right in front of me? Why hadn't I noticed it earlier? I was unable to remain here. I couldn't stand idly by while someone in my own pack was plotting against us. I pushed the door open without thinking twice and entered the room, staring at the traitor in the darkness. "What are you doing?" With a shaky but firm voice, I demanded. There was silence in the room. Nobody moved for a second. The traitor, whom I had trusted, then turned to me, their eyes wide with surprise. Their voice was tremulous as they said, "Valeria," but they soon composed themselves. "You're not supposed to be here." I stepped forward with my fists clenched at my sides and declared, "I heard everything. You and Malik have been collaborating. Why?" The traitor swallowed forcefully, regret and guilt covering their face. They muttered, "It wasn't supposed to be like this, Valeria," but their words didn't make me feel any less angry. "How long? How long have you been secretly organizing this?" The sharp, bitter pain in my chest made it difficult for me to speak. Their eyes darted around anxiously as they stammered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was merely attempting to keep the pack safe. I reasoned that perhaps if I assisted Malik, defend the pack. My voice rising in disbelief, I interrupted. "You've endangered us all. Everything we have fought for and worked for has been betrayed by you." My face was getting hot, and I could feel the rage building inside of me. I wanted to lash out and stop this before it got any worse, but I was unable to do so. I couldn't decide which hurt more, the betrayal or the knowledge that I had put my trust in this individual. Their voice broke as they said, "You don't understand." There was nothing I could do. Everything was in danger from them. The pack is our collective future. My heart was racing, and I was trembling with anger. "You should have come to me, to Ronaldo. We would have found a way. However, you decided to take the simple route. You decided to trust him." Tears filled the traitor's eyes. "This is not what I ever wanted. I didn't intend for it to get this far." "So, why did you do that?" My voice trembling with emotion, I demanded. Before they could answer, I felt a surge of anger rush through me. It was too much betrayal. Before they could harm anyone else, I had to take action. However, I heard the distinct sound of footsteps behind me as I moved forward, prepared to make a decision that would alter everything forever. As I turned around, I saw Ronaldo walk in with a somber expression. He was here because he had heard the commotion. "What's happening?" His voice was steady but brimming with the tension that pervaded the air as he asked. They immediately looked away as the traitor's face went white. "Ronaldo, none of this was intentional on my part. Please comprehend." However, there was no comprehension. No longer. Ronaldo's eyes were filled with the same pain I was experiencing as he gazed at me. He was aware. In my face, he saw it. I no longer had to bear the betrayal alone. "We must make a decision," I said quietly, my voice cracking. "Do we show mercy, or do we defend the pack?" The decision's weight was too much to bear. I knew what I needed to do, but the consequences of that choice were far too great. And when the traitor's beseeching eyes locked with mine, I realized I had to make a choice that would alter our future for all time. The air was suddenly filled with a cold, sharp sound, a message from the outside of the pack, a shivering, broken wolf. "Valeria," it gasped, "Malik is rearranging his troops. They are now stronger because of the traitor." My heart fell. We had become weaker, not stronger, as a result of the traitor's actions. We needed to move quickly. The storm had arrived. Could we get the group together in time? Would we perish as a result of the traitor's treachery? Was it too late, or would we make it through this battle? Chapter 073, Emiliano's POV. I sat in the quiet of the Montoya estate's dimly lit library. Everything felt more burdensome than before. My bond, my legacy, and my family all felt like a heavy chain dragging me down. The darkness within me matched the darkness outside. In my mind, I could still hear my father making demands of me that I would never be able to meet. My family's expectations had always held me captive. Santiago, my father, had never offered me an option. His authority and control over me pervaded everything I did. It was oppressive. And now, despite my partner's love, a persistent sense of hopelessness persisted. Would I ever be free? Would I ever be able to live for myself? I tried to concentrate on the sensation of my connection to her, my mate, while I closed my eyes. The only rational thing in my life was her. She was my fulcrum. However, even that seemed to be vanishing. We had always had a close bond, but I wasn't sure how much longer it could last, now that tradition and my father's pressure were crushing me. I turned as I heard footsteps echoing down the hallway and saw Matteo coming into the room. I could tell he was carrying the same burden as me by the tired expression on his face. Even though we had always been close, it felt strained lately. "Emiliano," he said in a quiet but worried voice. "You haven't said anything. Is everything okay?" I sighed deeply and combed through my hair. I'm not sure if I can continue. Under my father's control, I'm not sure I can continue to live this way." Matteo sat across from me, looking into my eyes as he crossed the room. "I understand the struggles you're facing. You've always felt that there's something greater than yourself that you need to live up to. However, you are not your father, Emiliano. You don't have to be the person he desires you to be." "I understand," I muttered, my voice breaking. "However, it's not that easy. My father has a way of making you feel like you have no other options or paths, and now I also have my bond to consider. I can't leave her. I won't." "Then don't," Matteo stated firmly. "However, don't allow your father's influence to impair your judgment. You must make your own decisions. You are capable of doing that." I was struck hard by the words. He was correct. However, the burden of my family's legacy was oppressive, even though I knew he was correct. I wasn't sure I could ever be free because the expectations were so ingrained in my spirit. "Do you believe that I am weak?" I blurted out the question before I could stop myself. Matteo's face softened as he turned to face me. "No, Emiliano, you're not weak. However, the weight of your burden is wearing you down. You must determine what is most important to you." The knot in my throat tightened as I swallowed forcefully. What if the most important thing is a lie? What if everything I've ever believed in is merely a mask? I have only ever known my father, the pack, and the legacy, but perhaps that is no longer sufficient. The only sound in the long silence between us was the gentle crackle of the fireplace fire. Matteo's eyes conveyed the same struggle I was going through. Although we both understood that the world in which we were born was changing, I wasn't sure how to proceed without losing the things that were important to me. After a moment, Matteo remarked, "Perhaps it's time for you to leave your own legacy. Not one that has anything to do with your father or anybody else. It is up to you to choose who you are. If you don't want to, you don't have to bear the burden of the past." I really wanted to believe him. However, I was hampered by my fear of losing everything, including my pack, my family, and my position in the world. I muttered almost to myself, "I can't just walk away. Without it, I don't even know who I am." Matteo said softly, "You're Emiliano Montoya. You are more than the name of your family. Don't let it define who you are." Something changed inside of me as his words hung in the air. I was able to breathe a little more easily for the first time in a long time. I was not required to take the route that was outlined for me. I could pick my own. However, that did not imply that it would be simple. I said, barely raising my voice above a whisper, "I don't know what comes next. However, I'm going to defend my bond. I will fight for what is rightfully mine, for her." Matteo smiled at me, knowingly. I know Emiliano like that. I felt a little lighter when I got up, but my choice still weighed heavily. Now there was no going back. I had to accept the decision I had made. However, something inside of me changed as I made my way to the door, and I felt as though I was finally taking charge of my own destiny. However, my father's voice stopped me cold as soon as I entered the hallway. "Emiliano," said Santiago in a stern and icy voice, "where do you anticipate going?" With my heart racing in my chest, I turned to look at him. It was this, the moment I had been dreading, the day I would have to confront my father's anger. Even though my heart was pounding, I said, "I'm not going back," in a steady voice. "You can no longer control me." I was immobilized by the expression in my father's eyes. He took a step forward, his stance stiff, his eyes blazing with rage. "You believe you can leave this family, from me?" I refused to back down, even though every part of me cried out for me to run. Not right now. Not after I'd made up my mind about everything. "I've made my decision," I stated firmly. "I am not the person you wish me to be. You cannot stop me from living my own life." Santiago's face changed to one that was colder and darker. "Emiliano, do you believe that you are in charge here? Do you believe that everything can be thrown away?" I said, barely raising my voice above a whisper, "I don't care what you think anymore," but it was a sharp statement. His fists were clenched as he stepped forward. You're doing something wrong. You'll be sorry you did this. I didn't answer. I was unable to. The words lingered in the air, and I briefly questioned whether I had made the wrong decision. However, I knew in my heart that there was no turning back. I had to be firm. I had to defend what was rightfully mine. I could hear my father's words reverberating in my head as I turned to go. You'll regret this. Would I? Would I feel bad about abandoning my father's legacy? Or did something new start here? I couldn't afford to turn around. I had to face the future head on, no matter what the consequences. I was certain that nothing would ever be the same again as I ventured out into the night. Now what would happen? Would I lose everything I had battled for, or could I withstand my father's wrath? Chapter 7-4, Mateo's POV. With my heart in a twisted mess, I watched from the shadows. It was intended to be a brief respite for Valeria and Reinaldo, a rare instance of calm amid the commotion all around us. However, as I stood there, unable to look away, I came to the realization that we would never again experience peace. My chest constricted as Valeria's quiet, sincere laugh reverberated throughout the room. I wanted to believe Reinaldo because he was so confident in their relationship and in himself. However, I sensed that we were getting farther apart, a gap that was too great for me to bridge. I was just a shadow in the background. She was his. I inhaled deeply before moving away from the door. With the war brewing, the undercurrents of betrayal and power shifts pulling everyone in different directions, they didn't need me there, not right now. As it was, the pack was barely surviving, and now I had another concern. As I walked to the old study, my footsteps reverberated through the hallway. A soft, unsettling glow filled the room as the moonlight barely made its way through the heavy curtains. Even though I didn't visit here very often, I needed answers tonight. I had discovered something that was urgent. The Council of the Underworld. They were part of it. In this game, Malik Blackthorn wasn't the only one who pulled strings. I had underestimated the depth of the shadows that had hung over us for so long, and I wasn't going to let them ruin everything we had worked so hard to achieve. I felt the pressure of time as I fumbled through the bookshelves, running my fingers over the dusty pages. At last, I located it. A little ancient book, its pages yellowed and tattered with time, tucked away behind others. It was a journal that had been handed down through our family's generations. It had always seemed to me to be merely a relic, a fragment of the past. However, I thought it might hold the secret to everything tonight. I could hardly understand the ancient languages and mysterious symbols that filled the pages. One item, however, caught our attention, a reference to an artifact, a powerful object that the Council had long since concealed. The dark magic that had ensnared us for centuries could be broken if I could locate it. However, I would have to cross boundaries I wasn't sure I was prepared to cross in order to get it. I felt sick to my stomach at the idea of betraying Reinaldo and taking matters into my own hands. But I knew there was nothing I could do. None of us knew what was going on behind closed doors, and it might be too late to stop them if I didn't take quick action. With my thoughts racing, I closed the journal. It would be difficult to reach the artifact, but it was concealed nearby and within our grasp. Strong allies of the Underworld Council would do whatever it took to preserve the magic. I was aware of the decision I had to make as I sat there looking at the journal in my hands. Valeria and Reinaldo would never get it. However, I wasn't sure I cared for the first time in my life. I had to keep her safe. I had to keep them all safe, even if it meant going behind their backs. My train of thought was interrupted by a loud noise in the hallway. I got up and hurriedly put the journal away. However, the door creaked open and Mateo entered before I could move. I went cold. What had he heard? "Mateo," I uttered softly, "why are you in this place?" He looked from the journal to me and said, "I should be asking you that. Mateo, what's actually happening? What plans do you have?" With my heart racing, I inhaled deeply. "I'm looking for a means to lift the curse, to put a definitive end to this war." His eyes narrowed as he walked across the room. "You believe you can handle it by yourself. We haven't been fighting for that." I spoke quickly and firmly. "I'm not doing it alone. However, I am unable to include Reinaldo. He wouldn't comprehend. This is greater than any of us." For a brief moment, Mateo's expression softened, but the tension persisted. You realize you're endangering us all, don't you? Everything will change if you pursue this artifact. A line that cannot be uncrossed will be crossed by you. I couldn't look him in the eye, so I turned away. Mateo, I have no other option. I have to keep Valeria safe. This power is necessary. I can't allow the council to rule over everything. Between us, the silence was heavy with unsaid words. He wanted to stop me in order to shield me from myself, and I understood what he was thinking. However, I had gone too far. I had already decided what to do. Mateo said, "You're right," in a voice that was hardly audible above a whisper. Everything will change as a result. However, what if it's too late already? I didn't respond. I was at a loss for words. I only had a plan that could destroy us all, no answers. Before I could say another word, the candlelight was extinguished by a chilly gust of wind that blew through the room. I turned to see a shadow in the doorway as the darkness seemed to be closing in on me. A silhouette, hardly discernible in the darkness, moved forward. It was a tall, black-clad woman with a shadow over her face. "Is this the one you've been searching for, Mateo?" Her voice was smooth and dangerous, like silk, as she asked. My heart was pounding as I froze. Even though I didn't know her, there was a certain magic in the air. She was no ordinary stranger. She was a witch. "Haven't you been looking for answers?" The witch went on, approaching. "I understand what you're trying to find. The item that has the power to lift the curse is the artifact. Mateo, though, be advised that the truth is never as straightforward as it first appears. My instincts told me to run, so I backed off a step. However, I was unable to. Not right now." "Who are you?" My voice trembling with doubt, I demanded. Her smile was icy and sardonic. "You don't realize how much I know. I have also witnessed Valeria's future." A beat skipped in my chest. "Valeria?" I said, my voice hardly more than a whisper. "You know what she's going to do. Tell me." In the shadows, the witch's eyes shone brightly. "I can demonstrate." "But Mateo, exercise caution. Everything could change based on what you see." Suddenly, a dark energy swirled around us as she raised her hands. My vision became blurry as the air became thicker. I was suddenly overcome by a vision of Valeria standing at a crossroads with a decision hanging in the balance after a flash of light struck. What was this? What was meant by it? I kept hearing the witch's voice. "Valeria will make the decision, Mateo. She will decide how everything turns out. However, there will be a cost to her decision." I was shaking and out of breath when the vision broke. With her face still obscured by the darkness, the witch grinned. "Mateo, the truth is out there. However, there are instances when the price of knowing it is just too high." My heart pounding, I staggered back. What had I just witnessed? What would happen to Valeria? And how would I use this information? I needed to know more, but the answers were evaporating, barely within grasp. What did Valeria decide to do? What lay ahead for her? And how could I prevent the course of this fate? Chapter 075, Ronaldo's POV. With my title weighing heavily on my shoulders, I sat on the throne. I felt as though the icy stone beneath me was suffocating me by pressing down on my chest. Except for the occasional crack of wood from the fire, the room around me was quiet. All I had were doubts, but my people were looking to me for guidance and answers. I had doubts about everything, including my strength and my capacity to guide them. Chaos was spreading outside. The renegade packs were more agitated than ever as Malik Blackthorn's army approached. The rifts within our own pack were now threatening to split us apart, and the traitor's betrayal still hurt. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep everything together. Valeria's presence was still present in the room with me. My anchor, the one thing that kept me rooted, had always been her. Even her strength seemed far away now, though, as though the storm we were in was too great for either of us to face on our own. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps, and I looked up to see the council meeting. Leaders from the other packs were present for the meeting, prepared to talk about our next course of action. I had hoped that we could band together to fight Malik and that the betrayal wouldn't cause us to fall apart, but I wasn't so sure anymore. As each alpha leader sat down and looked around the room suspiciously, the tension in the room increased. Like the quiet before a storm, there was a noticeable tension between us. I started, attempting to maintain a steady tone. "We're running out of time." We underestimated how close Malik's forces were. We must take action or risk losing everything. Though not everyone agreed, there were mutterings of agreement. With his arms folded across his chest, Alpha Riggs of the Ironclaw pack leaned forward. He sneered, "Easier said than done, Reinaldo. You expect us to simply follow you into battle when your small alliance is disintegrating?" I tried to keep my cool and clenched my fists. "This isn't about following me," I said, my voice low. "The goal is to keep our people safe. Malik will destroy us all if we don't band together and stand as one." "You're looking for unity?" Riggs gave a sour laugh. "You're not even capable of keeping your own pack together. Take a look at the mess you're in. The acts of the traitor are only the first step." I didn't want to acknowledge how painful his words were. We were beginning to see the cracks in our own walls, as well as in our alliances. The pack had been rocked by the traitor's betrayal, and now those same tremors threatened to destroy everything we had fought for. Refusing to let his words break me, I inhaled deeply. "I am aware of the stakes, and I know what's broken, but I'm not going to let this pack go, not while I'm still breathing." Alpha Laura, who had been quiet up until now, opened her mouth. "You're not the only person here who wants to defend their people, Reinaldo. Each of us must consider our own forces. We must be able to trust one another if we intend to fight Malik. Whether we fight with you or against you will depend on your leadership and deeds." I met each person's eyes as I scanned the room. I could see the hesitation in their posture and the doubt in their faces. They had no faith in me, not entirely. And after everything that had transpired, I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to regain that trust. I got up and looked around the group. With a steady voice, I said, "You have a choice. When Malik arrives, you have the option to stand with me or by yourself. I won't plead for your allegiance. I'll fight for this pack, though, and you pose a threat to everything we've established if you can't stand by me." There was silence in the room. I briefly believed that they might turn against me and that the alliance would end there. Then they nodded, one after the other. They knew I was their only hope, but they still didn't fully trust me. They also understood that none of us could defeat Malik on our own. Although there was a slight decrease in tension, it persisted. Until the war was won, it would never end. I could feel the pressure of my choice mounting as the meeting came to an end. I had decided. I had taken a stand. However, it was still unclear how much that decision would cost. A figure emerged from the shadows just as I was ready to leave the room. When I saw the familiar shape, my heart skipped a beat. It was unbelievable to me. Not in this place, not right now. A man I wished I would never see again. "You," I uttered, my voice icy with incredulity. "Why are you in this place?" The man smiled slowly and sinisterly at me, wearing a black outfit and a hood over his face. In a low, menacing whisper, he said, "Reinaldo, you've made such progress. However, you now have an option. What are you looking for?" My body tensed as I demanded. His eyes gleamed with malice, and his smile grew. "I've made you an offer. Join forces with Malik Blackthorn. Put an end to this conflict before it starts, or refuse and watch as everything you've worked so hard to create is destroyed." My mind was racing when I froze. The moment I had been dreading was here. Malik wasn't the only enemy. It was everything that had been tugging at me, my people, and my pack. The struggle for survival was no longer the only one at stake. Everything I held dear was put to the test. I said, my voice shaking with rage, "You're wasting your time." I refused to accompany him. Anger flashed in the figure's eyes. "You have no other option. You will be completely destroyed if you refuse to join Malik and accept his offer." His words caused the room's air to become heavy. He had just given me an ultimatum, and I could feel the weight of it mounting. I was forced to remain steadfast. Despite my racing thoughts, I firmly declared, "I will never bow to Malik. I'll never turn on my people." The figure's smile wavered briefly before vanishing into the darkness, leaving me with nothing but the chilly, deserted room and the echoes of his threat. I knew that this war was far from over as I stood there with my heart racing. It was only getting started. I never realized how much survival would cost. Was the weight of my choices already too much for me to handle, or would I be able to keep everything together? And what would I lose if I didn't? The answers remained elusive. But whatever came next, I had to face it. In this lethal game, what would be the next move? Would I defend myself, or would everything I valued be destroyed in the name of survival? Chapter 076. Valeria's POV. Never before had I felt so conflicted. My relationship with Ronaldo had never been closer, but the burden of everything else felt insurmountable. My family's secrets were eating away at me, the war was drawing near, and even the memory of Emiliano was haunting me. How could I make all of this work? When everything seemed to be falling apart around us, how could I keep everyone I cared about safe? As I slipped away from the protection of the pack's camp, the cool night air sliced through the trees. I was unable to remain motionless, not while Malik Blackthorn's shadow hovered over us all, and there were still unsolved questions. I had to learn more about the rogue wolves who had joined him. I had to know why they had lied about everything I believed to be true. With a purpose, I made my way through the forest, my senses sharpened by the surrounding darkness. Every rustle in the bushes and every crack of a twig seemed to be a part of a bigger web that was encroaching on me. There had to be rogue wolves out there. They must have been, and I was going to track them down. I eventually found an old, deserted cabin deep in the woods after hours of tracking. Even though it was dilapidated and nearly forgotten, something about it felt off. My gut told me to go back, but I was unable to do so. Not right now, not when I was so near. I saw movement inside as I moved closer. There was a person present. I inhaled, bracing myself for the next move. I wasn't sure what I was anticipating, an ally or an ambush. However, the subsequent events exceeded my expectations. A silhouette emerged from the darkness, a rogue wolf with his cloak partially covering his face. I sensed the dark energy that encircled him like a storm, the power that radiated from him. The man said in a low, menacing voice, "You've been searching for me, and you've located me now." I didn't give up. "Who are you? What are you looking for?" There was no humor in his quiet laugh. "Are you not Valeria Montoya, Santiago's daughter? We have a lot to discuss, but you aren't aware of it yet." A beat skipped in my chest. "What knowledge do you possess regarding my father?" His dark, knowing eyes glinted in the moonlight. "Everything, and I am aware of what lies ahead for you, Valeria, what your father has long concealed from you, the truth about your ancestry." I felt cold when I heard about my father, the man who had brought me up and influenced everything I believed to be true about myself. "What is the truth?" Even though I was trembling, I asked. I could feel the weight of the rogue's words as he took a step closer. "The power of your family is linked to ancient, formerly cursed bloodlines. Your father never told you about the curse, and it still exists. It's not just about your father, though. Valeria, it's all about you. You are bound to something far more ancient and sinister than you can fathom." My mind was racing. "What are you saying?" "Your father's past isn't as spotless as you believe," I'm saying. "Now that he has been keeping the truth from you, it is time for you to discover your true self." The words were like a kick to the stomach. "How is Malik Blackthorn related to this?" I insisted. The rogue's face grew serious. "Everything. Malik has been looking for the secret to unleash your bloodline's full potential, and he's coming closer now. However, Valeria, there's something you must comprehend. You must make a decision." I stepped back, my head spinning. "What are you saying? What option?" "You have two options. Either you confront your father about the truth, which includes everything he has been concealing, or you choose to keep it hidden. But know this, if you choose to bury it, you'll be just as guilty as he is." His words weighed heavily on me, and my heart began to race. My father had been hiding something from me all along, something gloomy, something that could change everything. But could I really confront him? Could I confront the man I had long admired and insist on the truth? My hesitation seemed to be sensed by the rogue. "Valeria, I'm giving you an escape route. You don't have to hide from the truth and remain in the shadows. Come on over. If you side with me, we can defeat your father and take back your future." For a brief moment, I believed I could hear my own heartbeat in the quiet as his words replayed in my head. It was this, the option I had been evading, the route that might take me in a more sinister direction, where I would have to compromise everything I had ever known. The rogue asked in a low, expectant voice, "What's it going to be? Are you going to defend your birthright, Or are you going to support your father and allow him to keep you in the dark for all time? I didn't have an answer, not just yet. My thoughts were racing with uncertainty, fear, and confusion. Would I truly betray my dad? Could I contradict all I had been taught and all I had held to be true? As though sensing my inner conflict, the rogue took a step back. Take your time. But Valeria, be aware of this. You cannot have both. You cannot claim your destiny and remain faithful to your father. You will need to make a decision. He then turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving me standing by myself with his words looming over me. The night air was cold as I stood there for a long time. My mind was racing with questions I couldn't answer, and my heart was thumping in my chest. What was it my father had kept from me? What did it portend for my future? And could I really assert my birthright by standing up to him? I made the choice. What would it cost me, though? The decision I had to make weighed heavily on my shoulders as I walked back to the pack. Everything was on the line. My relationship with Reinaldo, my family, and my future. I had trusted this man my entire life. Could I betray him? Or was I going to destroy everything I believed I knew in order to fight for what was rightfully mine? And how much would that choice cost? Although the answers seemed so distant, time was of the essence. I would soon have to make a decision. When the time came, what would I do? Would I put everything on the line for my fate, or would I conceal the truth to keep my family safe? Chapter 077, Reinaldo's POV. I sat on the throne and stared at the empty room in front of me, feeling as though the entire world was pressing down on me. The hearth's fire crackled, but it provided no warmth. The tension in the air was heavy and oppressive, like something alive coiling around my chest and tightening its grip every second. My pack and people looked to me for leadership, but the truth was that I wasn't sure if I could still keep them safe. Malik Blackthorn was no longer the only enemy. It was more than just external forces encroaching. It was internal. My own pack's alliances were fracturing more quickly than I could mend them. I believed I knew who I could trust, but now I wasn't so sure. One of my trusted generals stepped through the open door. His eyes avoided mine, his face grim. He didn't have to say anything. I was aware that something was amiss. "Reinaldo," he said softly, "there's news. A betrayal. We've lost one of our own. They have sided with Malik Blackthorn." The ground seemed to drop out from under me. I gazed at him, attempting to comprehend what he was saying and the reality he was presenting. "Who?" I insisted. "General Varro," he said, hardly able to look me in the eye. I could feel my anger building quickly and intensely. Varro. He had been here from the start. He had fought at my side in battles and was trusted with secrets and strategies. He was not merely a soldier. He belonged to the family. He had now betrayed us. Why? My voice was hardly more than a whisper as I asked. I had to comprehend. I required clarification. He hasn't made many statements. However, we have verified it. For weeks, he has been communicating with Blackthorn's forces. He is supplying them with information and negotiating with them. Everything we've built has been betrayed by him. It was like a physical blow to my body. It hurts to be betrayed, but by someone you trust? No blade could ever cut as deeply as it does. "We can't let this go unpunished," I said, standing up, my voice cold with fury. "Bring the others together. We are meeting, right now." Soon after, the council convened. As I gazed at the faces around me, faces I had known for years, faces that had been dependable and loyal, the room was filled with silence. Some of them were now staring at me as if I were the enemy, and they weren't sure if they could still follow me. I started by looking around the room and saying, "I know what you're all thinking. You believe we're going out of control. You believe Varro's betrayal is only the first step, but I'm not going to let this pack go. Not while I'm still breathing." Alpha Laura was the first to speak, her tone suspicious. "Reinaldo, how can we trust you now? One of your most reliable generals is no longer with you, and we are all aware that this is not just a case of one man betraying another." I tried to contain my anger by clenching my fists. Yes, Varro was a traitor. However, this is about more than just him. This relates to the Manantiel de Luna pack's future. I'll do whatever it takes to keep this pack safe and prevent it from disintegrating. "However," Alpha Riggs inquired in a doubtful tone, "how can we be certain that the man next to you won't act in the same manner?" How can we be sure we won't be the next? There was silence in the room. I could feel my pack's eyes on me and their doubt bearing down on me. Never in my life had I felt so isolated. But now I couldn't give up. I wouldn't. Not after all that we had battled for. We take action, I said firmly. We track down Varro and hold him accountable for his treachery. We demonstrate to the rest of the pack that everyone is subject to the law. Nobody. I could see the change in the mood and the nods going around the room. However, I knew it was insufficient. I couldn't fix every crack because they were already quite deep, not by themselves. My thoughts were racing as I strolled through the castle's lengthy hallways later that evening, as the council meeting was coming to an end. More than ever, the burden of leadership felt heavy. The pack's shaky alliances, the traitor among us, and the rogue wolves were all too much. I required clarification. I saw Varro as I rounded the corner. Something, guilt, filled his eyes as he stood there with his back to the wall. Feeling sorry? No, it wasn't regret. Something darker was involved. He had already decided. Varro, I said icily, you have deceived me. This pack has been betrayed by you. I'm curious as to why. At first, he didn't answer. He simply stood there, looking away from me. I went on, approaching him. You owe me that much. You must tell me the truth. At last, he spoke in a strained tone. Reinaldo, you wouldn't comprehend. I didn't want to do this. However, I was left with no other option when your father began to get involved in things he shouldn't have. My dad? Surprised, I asked. What are you discussing? Varro's eyes became gloomy. Reinaldo, your father's hands are not at all clean. He has been negotiating with Blackthorn. He has years of experience on both sides, and I had to make a decision after learning. The words were heavy and thick in the air between us. My head whirled. My dad? Had the man who reared me, the one I trusted most, been on both sides? It was illogical. But then, a dark thought crossed my mind. What if it was real? Is this the main point of this? My voice quivered with a mix of incredulity and rage as I asked, For Blackthorn, you betrayed us? For your own benefit? Varro said in a low, resigned voice, I didn't turn on you. I betrayed your dad, and I took this action to keep this pack safe. Our only chance of surviving what lies ahead is through our alliance with Blackthorn. You must realize that. I briefly doubted my ability to breathe as my heart thumped in my chest. I had the impression that everything was falling apart. My dad, the group. I was losing control of everything I had known. I said in a disdainful tone, Then you're no better than Blackthorn. Everything I've worked for has been betrayed by you. Varro's expression tensed, and I briefly feared that he would attack me. Then he just shook his head. Reinaldo, you don't get it. However, you will. You'll understand that I did what I had to do when you do. Varro turned and left before I could reply, vanishing into the darkness. I stood there for a while, his words spinning in my head. Blackthorn and my father? How could that have happened? However, a familiar face emerged from the shadows as I turned to go, a face I never thought I'd see. Reinaldo, the voice murmured, you're not doing this alone. I went cold. The voice was too familiar, and the reality struck me like a ton of bricks. Valeria? With my heart pounding, I whispered, Why are you in this place? She moved forward, something I couldn't quite identify shining in her eyes. I have a message for you, which is why I am here. Something that has the power to alter everything. I felt as though the room was closing in on me. What was going on? What was it she knew? I've seen things, Reinaldo, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Things no one else is aware of. Furthermore, we should be concerned about more than just Malik Blackthorn. It's a much closer person. My heart stopped. Who? Valeria said, her eyes meeting mine, the real mastermind behind the betrayal. And you won't like who it is. Who was it? What did it signify for my rule, too? Chapter 078, Emiliano's POV. My footsteps reverberated in the quiet as I moved through the Montoya estate's halls. Once a home, the mansion now felt like a prison. Every nook and cranny served as a reminder of what I had lost, including my father and my relationship, our mutual trust, and the future I once believed was mine. I had the impression that the walls were closing in on me. There was no one left for me to turn to. The only thing that kept me rooted was my relationship with my partner, but even that felt ambiguous. Santiago, my father, was no longer the man I knew. I was no longer able to ignore the truth about my bond and my family's history. The weight of it was starting to suffocate me. It was all too much. I had to speak with someone who would comprehend, someone who wasn't blinded by the pressure of my last name or the weight of tradition. Matteo was the only remaining individual who could provide that understanding. The only area of the mansion that still seemed to be peaceful was the old library, where I found him. The flickering light from the candles created long shadows on the walls, and the air was heavy with the smell of old leather-bound books. I entered the room and said, "Matteo, we must speak." His expression was neutral but weary as he raised his head from the book he was reading. "What are you thinking about?" With everything bearing down on me, I took a seat next to him. "It's my dad. I'm not sure what to believe anymore. He's evolving. Furthermore, I don't believe it's for the better." Matteo put the book down and scowled as he turned to face me. "What do you mean?" "I mean everything. His schemes, the way he treats me like a pawn in his game, and the way he uses me. Additionally, I'm now discovering previously unknown facts about our family. Things that have the power to completely alter things." I stopped to collect my thoughts. I don't wish to participate in his political activities. It seems like I've always been his tool, even though I don't want to be. And now that he's taking advantage of my bond, I feel like I'm losing who I am. After a brief period of silence, Matteo spoke again in a firm but gentle tone. "I understand your point, but you must comprehend something, Emiliano. The man who believes in power is your father. He has spent his entire life trying to maintain control. And now, with everything happening with the packs, with Malik Blackthorn and the rogue wolves, he's desperate. Even if it means sacrificing you, he is attempting to act in the best interests of the Montoya name." The truth of what he said made my chest tighten as I looked at him. "Matteo, I'm not a pawn. I can no longer allow him to take advantage of me in this way. I must take action. I have to decide for myself. However, I'm not sure if I can. I'm not sure if I'm strong enough to resist him." Matteo's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long time, I realized that I wasn't struggling alone. "Emiliano, you underestimate your strength. You always were, but you must no longer allow him to dictate to you. You must make a decision." I turned my head away as his words weighed heavily on me. "I'm not sure if I can challenge him. Not after all that he has done for me. He is my dad. I was raised by him. How am I going to combat him?" Matteo said sharply, "Emilian, you're not fighting him because of the past. The future is the reason you're fighting him. For yourself. For the life you desire, not the one he is attempting to impose upon you." Though it wasn't the same anger I had felt toward my father, I could feel it stirring inside of me once more. It was anger of a different sort. The kind of realization that I had spent too much time living someone else's dream. I said, quietly but resolutely, "You're right. I can't continue to be used by him. I won't." Matteo put a hand on my shoulder as his eyes grew softer. "Then take action. Emiliano, take charge of your life. This is not unique to you. You have your partner in me." Emotions erupted at the mention of my partner. My anchor, the one thing that kept me rooted, had always been the connection I had with her. Now, though, even that felt uncertain and shaky. I admitted, "I simply don't know what's real anymore. Everything is so complicated. The future, my bond, my father. I'm not sure where I fit in with all of this." Matteo smiled at me comfortingly. "Emiliano, you belong wherever you want. Nobody can make that decision for you. Not your dad, not anybody." With the decision bearing down on me, I nodded. I couldn't keep avoiding the decision I had to make. I had to choose the future I wanted to build. A future where I wasn't controlled, where I was free to choose my path. I said firmly, "I'm going to stand up to him. I don't give a damn about the price. I will no longer allow him to control me." With pride in his eyes, Matteo nodded. "All right, just keep in mind that you are not alone in this." I felt more clear-headed than I had in a long time as I got up to go. At least I had a choice in the uncertain path ahead, and I was prepared to fight for it. I was about to leave the library when my father entered through the open door. "Emiliano," he said in a stern and icy tone, "I have been trying to find you." I went cold. The room grew more tense. I hadn't expected him to find me here, but now that he had, I knew this confrontation was inevitable. "You've decided, haven't you?" His eyes were sharp as he asked. My heart thumping in my chest, I gazed at him. Despite the storm raging inside of me, I said, "I have," in a steady voice. "And you won't like it." His eyes narrowed, and I felt a chill go through me because of how cold they were. "Emiliano, you will not disobey me." My blood ran cold at the finality in his voice. It was this. I had been waiting for this moment. I had made up my mind to challenge him, and it was now a reality. And now I had to face the consequences of it. What would come next? Would my dad attempt to shatter me? Could I hold my own? There were no clear answers, but I knew that I couldn't turn back. I had to accept the decision I had made. I took a tall stance and confronted him. "Papa, I'm no longer your pawn. I'm going to fight for my future." The room seemed to get colder, and his eyes darkened. "Then, Emiliano, get ready for the fallout. You won't prevail in this battle." I had no idea how the fight for my independence would turn out, and it had only just begun. But now I wasn't going to back down. I was prepared to fight for my future at any cost. What was my dad going to do next? Would he recognize that I was no longer the son under his control, or would he attempt to break me? Chapter 079, Valeria's POV. As I left the rogue wolf, my head reeling from the weight of his revelations, the night felt heavier than usual. I couldn't take in all that he had told me about my father, Santiago. Although I had always known that he kept some things secret, I wasn't sure how to handle the new information I had just discovered. Even though I had never had a closer relationship with Reinaldo, the realization of what I had just heard caused me to reevaluate everything I had previously believed about my family. The dark magic, the betrayal, the power, all of it seemed too much to handle. I had to speak with Santiago. No matter the cost, I needed answers. However, the weight of everything weighed down on me as I got closer to the Montoya estate, making breathing more difficult. This journey was about facing the truth that had been kept from me all my life, not just about facing my father. Nothing felt the same as I entered the estate's well-known hallways. I could feel the weight of the secrets that had been buried here bearing down on me. They were heavy in the air. My heart was pounding as I walked to my father's study. I was afraid of what I might find, and I couldn't ignore the doubt that was eating away at me. But I was powerless. I had to confront him. He had to tell me the truth. Santiago was examining documents while seated at his desk, his face softly lit by a lamp. When I walked in, he didn't even look up. I said, "Father," in a steady voice that betrayed my nervousness. "We must speak." His face was unreadable as he put down the papers. In a chilly tone, he said, "What is it, Valeria?" Despite my best efforts to remain composed, I trembled as I said, "I know what you've been hiding. I am aware of the dark magic and the agreements you struck, and I am aware that you have been taking advantage of me and using my relationship with Reinaldo as a political ploy." He squinted, but remained silent. His body tensed as though he were getting ready for a fight, and I could see the change in his posture. But he remained silent, waiting for me to continue. I said, my voice rising with the rage that had been building inside of me, "You've lied to me. I need to know why you've kept so many secrets." He remained silent for a while, so I assumed he would simply let me continue accusing him. Then, however, he leaned forward in his seat and met my gaze. His voice was low and had a sharp edge that I had never heard before. "You want to know the truth, Valeria?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I was tired of waiting for answers, even though my heart was thumping in my chest. His voice was steady as he said, "I used dark magic," but I could hear the weight of the admission in his voice. "To maintain the power of the Montoya family, to keep us safe, to maintain our position at the top. Do you believe that without it, I could have protected the family? Do you really believe I could have avoided doing things that others wouldn't dare in order to keep all of this intact?" It was as though the ground had suddenly opened up beneath me. "You used dark magic?" My voice was hardly more than a whisper as I asked. He gave a nod. "I took the required actions to preserve the Montoya legacy. Indeed, I employed you, your relationship with Reinaldo, to keep the family stable. But Valeria, it was always about safety. I did everything I could for you and this family's future. I couldn't take my eyes off him, even though his words felt like a slap. I had always believed in him and trusted him. And now it was all falling apart. I had been living a lie my entire life. I was unsure of how to interpret it. "How about Ronaldo?" I muttered. "How about him? How about our relationship?" For a split second, Santiago's eyes softened before hardening once more. "Valeria, that bond was only ever intended to be a tool, a means to guarantee the safety of the Montoya family. That bond served as a means of ensuring your protection because you have always been the source of our strength." Incredulous, I shook my head. I said, my mouth feeling like acid, "You used me. All my life, you have been taking advantage of me." Santiago got up and walked slowly in my direction. "I took the necessary actions to keep this family safe, and you are the future, Valeria. However, don't take my behavior as anything else. I've always done what's necessary." In addition to the growing rage inside of me, there was also fear. I was afraid of what this meant, of what my father could do, and of what would happen to everything I had known if I left him. My voice broke as I said, "You've ruined everything. I had faith in you. Do you believe I wanted to do this?" Now Santiago's voice was harsh. "You think I wanted to live with the lies I've told? What have I given up for this family? Do you believe I had fun with it?" I had no response. I was no longer even able to look at him. He softened his voice once more and said, "Valeria, I've taken the required steps to protect you. You have no idea how dangerous we are, the forces pursuing us. There are other threats besides Malik Blackthorn." A shiver went through me. "What do you mean?" With a growing sense of unease in my chest, I asked. Santiago lowered his voice and moved closer. "Everything we've worked for could be destroyed by something much worse out there. Valeria, there is a prophecy that links a disastrous incident to Reinaldo's lineage." My heart stopped in my chest as I froze. "What?" Breathing heavily, I whispered. "According to the prophecy, the Pax will fall because of Reinaldo's lineage," Santiago added, "that his presence will serve as the impetus for a conflict that will wipe out everything." I stepped back, attempting to absorb the significance of what he had said. I shook my head and said, "No, that isn't feasible. That isn't possible." I couldn't quite read the darkness in Santiago's eyes. "Valeria, you cannot deny the reality. It's not the future you've envisioned, and the decisions you make right now have the power to either save or ruin everything." I was at a loss for words. The truth hung heavy in the air, and the room felt oppressive. Santiago dropped the last bombshell before I could respond. His voice was icy and decisive as he stated, "You have a choice. If you stand with me, we can work together to influence the future. Or you could support Ronaldo and jeopardize everything we've worked so hard to achieve." My heart fell to my stomach. Now what was I to do? How could I decide between Ronaldo and my father? Would I be able to trust either of them? Even though the choice I had to make seemed unachievable, I was certain that I could no longer remain in the background. They had exposed the truth. I now had to make a decision regarding it. Would I fight for the love that had become my strength, or would I choose to be loyal to my father? Which man, the one who had won my heart or the one who had reared me, would I trust? I understood that my choice would alter everything as I stood there with the weight of the world bearing down on me. But could I bear the repercussions? Chapter 080, Ronaldo's POV. Outside the Manantiel de Luna mansion, the night air was heavier than usual, as though there was an unseen weight on the land itself. I gazed out at the packed grounds from the balcony. The mansion behind me loomed like a silent sentinel, unwavering but somehow hollow, while the trees were obscured by the night's darkness. I ought to have been preoccupied with the impending conflict. With Malik Blackthorn's forces getting closer every day, the tension was growing. But I had Valeria on my mind and in my heart. My strength had always come from my relationship with the woman I loved. However, the weight of the secrets that surrounded us threatened to shatter us, and I now felt uncertain. The wind rustled through the trees, and I felt a sudden sharp chill. I sensed a stirring in the air, but I had no idea why. Something sinister. Then the message arrived. It came in the shape of a shadowy figure emerging from the darkness, his presence so eerie that it made my skin itch. I instantly recognized him as a member of the Underworld Council, the same individuals who had been secretly influencing us. The figure said, "You're Reinaldo Vargas," in a smooth voice that was tinged with an eerie serenity. "I have a warning for you. My fists clenched at my sides as I turned to face him. "What are you looking for?" With his eyes sparkling in the moonlight, the figure took a step closer. "You've been chasing the wrong enemy. Your fate, your love, and your relationship with Valeria are not what you think they are." I remained silent. I couldn't form the words because I was too angry and confused. I was more certain than ever of my connection to Valeria and our love for one another. How could he doubt it? His voice grew colder as he went on. "The curse that ties you and Valeria together is more than just a bond. It's a component of a darker, much larger design. A plan intended to put an end to all of your hard-won victories. Pure love was never intended for you. It was planned, and you will soon realize the reality of it." His words lingered in my chest like a dense fog. Unable to control my trembling voice, I took a step forward. "What are you discussing?" With my heart racing, I demanded. "What is this curse? What do you want me to understand?" The figure's lips curled into a knowing smirk as he said, "The truth is simple. Your entire relationship with Valeria has been manipulated by the Underworld Council. It was always a means to an end, a tool. You never claimed your love. It was intended to weaken the packs, upset the werewolf world, and grant the Council the authority they had long desired. The connection between you, it contributes to the chaos." His remarks were like a kick to the stomach. All of a sudden, the world I had believed in was falling apart. I was unable to understand it. I was unable to accept it. I said, hardly raising my voice above a whisper, "You're lying. This isn't possible." The figure's eyes stayed fixed, icy and unblinking. "It's the reality, and you will have to confront it when the time comes. However, it will be too late by then." I wanted to snap. I wanted to rip him to pieces. However, I was unable to. I knew in my heart that he was telling the truth. The love I believed to be a gift, the curse that had always tied me to Valeria, was really a means of controlling us both. "What are you saying, Valeria? Has she been exploited?" I asked, my voice breaking as I spoke. "We never had a true bond." The figure took a step back, seemingly enjoying the confusion and rage that were roiling inside of me. "True? This was never real. It was designed. You will soon be forced to accept your fate." I stood there with my world shattered as he turned to go, vanishing into the darkness. Now how could I confront Valeria? When everything I had fought for and everything I had believed in had been manipulated, how could I still look at her the same way? The night was oppressively colder now. The truth was like a physical force pressing down on me. I had to inform her. I needed to track her down and tell her everything. But what if she didn't believe me? What if she refused to accept the reality and turned away? The idea twisted like a knife in my chest. My strength had always been my love for her. Now, though, I wasn't sure if I could shield her from the gloom that enveloped us both. I turned my back on the balcony and made my way to Valeria's room. I felt like I was getting further away from the man I used to be with each step. I couldn't stop now, though. I had to face reality. Whatever came next, I had to face it. I hesitated when I got to her door. Everything was too much to bear. However, I was unable to run. No longer. I knocked. Her voice came through the door, soft and warm. "Reinaldo, what is it?" I inhaled deeply. I said, my voice just above a whisper, "We need to talk. It has to do with the curse. About us. Almost everything." She paused for a long moment before answering. "Enter now." With a heavy heart from having to tell the truth, I entered, and I realized that this could be the moment that broke us apart as I gazed at her, my partner, my love, the woman who had always been everything to me. I started to say, "Valeria," but my voice trailed off when I noticed the expression in her eyes. "What if I told you that everything we've endured and everything we've battled for was a part of a larger scheme? What if our love turned out to be a means of controlling us both, rather than the gift we believed it to be?" Her face flashed with confusion as her eyes widened. "What are you saying?" The words I needed to say caught in my throat as I swallowed hard. "We've been duped," I'm saying. That our bond and everything we believed we had control over were never truly ours. We have been exploited by the Council. Her eyes were filled with shock, and I knew that this was only the beginning. The reality had arrived, and it was even more terrible than either of us had anticipated. However, as I observed her, I came to the realization that this was no longer just about Valeria and me. The fate of the entire world was at stake, and everything would be lost if we didn't halt the impending event. As she approached me, she said in a shaky voice, "What are we going to do?" I had no response. However, I was certain that I would no longer allow the council to rule us. I would fight for the future of everything we had fought for, not just for Valeria. However, I couldn't help but wonder if it was too late as I stared at her, the last remnant of my hope disintegrating,